Welcome to the Film Florida podcast. I'm John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Before we get to our interview, if you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. Please also consider going to our website and donating $20.24 for our 2024 fundraising campaign. Visit the Film Florida merchandise page at filmflorida.creator-spring.com to purchase Film Florida t-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, and more. All merchandise proceeds go to the Film Florida Filmmaker Grant and Scholarship Fund. Traci Deen is the president and CEO of Conservation Florida. Conservation Florida is an organization working on your behalf to protect Florida's land, water, wildlife, and way of life. Chad Crawford is the creative director of Crawford Entertainment. Established in 2010, Crawford Entertainment specializes in producing award-winning branded entertainment programs, and they also distribute that content for millions to see. Together, Crawford Entertainment and Conservation Florida produced Protect Our Paradise, a 6-episode docuseries that explores Florida's wild, wonderful places and exposes environmental issues that threaten their existence. We talked to Chad and Traci about Florida, the environment, the docuseries, and more on this episode of the Film Florida podcast. Here's my conversation with Traci Deen and Chad Crawford. Welcome to the Film Florida podcast, Chad and Traci.
Thanks for having us, John.
Yes, thanks, John. We're happy to be here.
So, Chad, you're the owner of Crawford Entertainment, a film company based in Lake Mary, Florida. You were actually on the Film Florida podcast back in season 1, almost 100 episodes ago. For those who may not have heard that episode, tell us a little bit about your background and about Crawford Entertainment.
Oh, 100 episodes, John. Good gosh. Does that date me? I mean, how long ago was that? Are we talking 5-10 years or
that
what?
Was, we were back in 2018 when we did those early episodes.
2018. Okay, not too bad. Our company's based here in Lake Mary, Florida. I own it with my wife, Christy. And for the last 17 years, we produce Florida-focused content. And that's it. I have a lot of people come to me and say, hey, will you do a show about this? And I say no. I'm so focused on telling Florida stories and have been for so long, and have created a real, niche around that subject. And everything I do, all the people I hire, everything is pointed in that direction. And we've had some success around our flagship show, How to Do Florida, 13 seasons, over 120 episodes. From that show, we've had a lot of other shows spawn and spin off from it, from our Emmy Award-winning series, The Outsiders Club, which is our kids show we did with Florida State Parks, teaching kids to get outside. Our yard show we do with Department of Environmental Protection, preaching Florida-friendly landscaping principles. Rethinking how we landscape in this state, using less nutrients, using less water, many other television series, one-offs, and which ultimately led to our partnership with Conservation Florida and what I would say our conservation series, which is Protect Our Paradise.
Which we are certainly going to talk a lot about. Traci, now you're the president and CEO of Conservation Florida. First, give us your background and then tell us about Conservation Florida.
Sure. So I am a 6th-generation Floridian, and I'm an attorney by trade. I'm a mom and a dog mom and an equestrian and a very proud Floridian. And I'm very lucky to serve as the CEO of Conservation Florida. We are a statewide land conservancy, and we're working to protect Florida's water and wildlife and wild places, and permanently connect and protect what's called the Florida Wildlife Corridor. And like many conservancies across the United States, we save land by facilitating, purchasing, or accepting donations of land and conservation easements, serving as a trusted community partner to support statewide land conservation, and through effective advocacy at the local and the state and the federal levels. As well as education and outreach programming, which we consider Protect Our Paradise a critical part of. We are really, really happy and honored to have partnered with Chad and his team to produce Protect Our Paradise. And it was really thanks to a very generous donation made by a family that's a big supporter of conservation here in our state, the Bellini family. So together, we've really put together something that we're all really, really proud of and happy to share with our fellow Floridians and our guests.
Very good, very good. Now, before we get to talk a little bit more about Protect Our Paradise, Chad, you mentioned that everything you do is Florida based. When you started the company, was that the purpose of the company, or is that just kind of happened by accident that you are just so Florida centric?
It was an evolution. I went to Full Sail. Let me back up a little bit. I, came out of the Navy, served in the Navy for 3 years, came out, and I was thinking, okay, what do I want to do? I had the GI Bill, and one of my teachers in high school, it was the last day of school, and I was in video production, and it was a new class. Video production had just started my senior year. Absolutely goofed off the entire time. It was my senior year. Me and my buddies were in there. I mean, it was just a joke. And the teacher came up to me, Charles Schumer. He's no longer with us, but he said, he put his arm around me. He said, "You know what? If you weren't such a goofball, you would be good at this. You have talent in this field." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." I took off, went to the Navy, was about to get out, but what he told me that day kept coming back. And so I said, "Well, let's give this a try." I went to Full Sail, and gosh, that was back when Full Sail used to have to rent their own video gear. They did not own any video gear. And if you
Wow.
know Full Sail, you know what a monster it is today and how much that school has grown.
Yep.
But that was in 95. Came out, started my own production company, and was very successful. Had one of the larger production companies here in Central Florida, had over 20 employees doing a lot of big national campaigns around the country. But I just got burned out, and I'm like, I want to do my own thing. I want to own something. And so a good friend of mine said, "Look, if you're going to do this, you need to do something you're incredibly passionate about." I said, "Well, I love Florida and I love film. Let's start there." And so I started How to Do Florida because it was really this sense I felt like so many people were coming here and were here, but they weren't here.
Yep.
This was their new address, but they weren't connecting with the Florida that I knew. And I knew that if we had a lot of people who weren't doing that, they were less apathetic about the environmental issues that impact it. So the goal of the show was to introduce people to Florida, the Florida that I knew, that I grew up with. And that's kind of where it started. And it just kind of began to, at some point, I made the conscious decision like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to focus on Florida, and all of our programming is going to point in that direction.
And now since then, you've recently founded Discover Florida Channel. How did this venture come to be, and where can people find that channel?
Well, this is just the evolution of technology and broadcast.
Yep.
Anybody who's looked at your TV or will listen to the news knows the kind of upheaval of this happening to the broadcast television film industry across the country, all starting with Netflix, House of Cards, what they've been able to do with creating their own content, how content is distributed, just in the last 10 years has completely changed. And so, look, we're right in there, right? We're right in that mix. And this channel is an opportunity to gather the world's largest collection of quality Florida-focused programming. And we're working on it today as we speak. After I get off this podcast, we're continuing to produce content for the channel, new content. Protect Our Paradise is up there now, and anybody can go to it. It functions just like a Netflix. So Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, you can download it there. You can watch it at discoverfloridachannel.com. There's an app for your phone. It's everywhere, just like everything is today, right? It's everywhere.
Great.
And so we're excited about that. And it's just a great place to sit and watch Florida programming with your family.
Excellent. Great. Now, Traci, being from Florida, we hear a lot about the environment as a state. From your perspective, what are some of the most important environmental challenges that we face here in Florida?
We did cover the big six, if you will, or six of the biggest in
Mhm.
Protect Our Paradise season one. But what I will say is that our state is growing really fast. And
Yeah.
the bulk of our environmental issues are really stemming from that untethered growth. It's happening at such a remarkable pace, faster than really anywhere in the United States. And so, we're seeing over 1,000 people move to Florida every single day. And with that, we're seeing about a city the size of Orlando joining our state every single year.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
to put that into context, in my grandfather's lifetime, when he was born, we're about 2 million people in the state of Florida.
Mm.
And he just passed last year, and we're at 22 million people and growing rapidly. And so that's just one lifetime. And with that growth, we are seeing the transition of our more rural and green and wild places into more intensive use. And with that comes, water issues
Right.
and air quality issues and the loss of our green space, the loss of habitat for our native plants and animals. And we're really losing the Florida that, as Chad mentioned, that we love, that we know, and that we want future generations to experience. And so, we as a state, we are experiencing water woes, of course, the loss of our native wildlife. And it's really, it's heartbreaking,
Yep.
but we're losing connectivity as well. And so a lot of our current conservation lands are connected throughout the state. We actually have an existing wildlife corridor that spans from the Everglades all the way to Pensacola and all the way up into Georgia and Alabama, but we're losing it because we're losing land at such a fast pace. So it's our goal to get ahead of that and to work with Floridians, across the state. And we hope that Protect Our Paradise really helps spark a lot of interest with viewers to join us to protect the place that we love and to protect our paradise.
Well, and I know we get into the docuseries, but just talk a little bit more about that tug of war. I mean, people don't want to feel like they're anti-development and anti-growth, but they also are very cognizant of what that means when we are growing as fast as we can. So from Conservation Florida's perspective, how do you balance that? Because you don't want to be the organization that's anti-growth and anti-development, but you also want to make sure people understand the ramifications of this rapid growth, right?
That's right. And look, we are not anti-development and we're not anti-growth.
Hmm.
What we are is pro saving our special places. We're pro being methodical and thoughtful about protecting the places that will have the greatest impact on the future sustainability of our state. What we save and what we pave in the next few years will determine the future health of our state. It's just that simple. And with that, it'll impact the economy.
Hmm.
And of course, it will impact what future generations of Floridians get to experience. And look, we get it. I want to live here. I get it. I understand why people are moving to Florida. It's the best place in the world, in my very, very, very biased opinion.
Hmm.
It's awesome, and I want people to fall in love with it the way that that Chad and I love it. But that means getting to know Florida's wildness and what makes Florida so special. And I really think that Protect Our Paradise is an introduction to falling in love with this place and hopefully an invitation to join us in protecting it.
And now let's kind of do the deep dive into Protect Our Paradise now. How did talk about what the series specifically is and share a little bit about the early development, the early conversations of how this came to be. Chad, you go first.
Well, it's funny because I was kind of looking back at old emails recently and some of the early development of it and different topics and different titles. And, it's creating a TV series is like having a child. You kind of don't know what you have early on. And as it gets a little older in your mind, a little more developed, it begins to become a little clear as to what this is and how it's going to behave. And this was no different. And I think, we had the idea a long time ago and we put together a sizzle, we put together this concept. And for me, the origins of it was to create something that I felt was going to be or needed to be required viewing for everybody who lives here. I felt like I wanted some kind of baseline for where we are, or not even, well, back up, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going on some of the key fundamental environmental issues that are right in front of us. That was the point of it. It wasn't, we weren't going to go crazy deep with this. This was like Florida conservation for dummies. This is like, here's where we are. Here's the main issues. Here's how our environment works. Here's how our aquifer works. Here are our springs, the importance of our coast, our corridor. Here's these fundamental elements that if we can focus on these, we'll move the needle in the right direction. You know, we did a lot of bouncing back and forth with Traci and her team as to which topics to feature. And, you know, there's a lot of like back and forth because it's tough. You're like deciding what should people, you know, learn about. And that's a tough decision, you know, and we had to make those decisions. We came up with 6 topics that we felt like would hit on all the eras we wanted to hit. And gosh, this series took over 2 years from more than that, over 3 years from once it was an idea to actually got completed. You know, people don't realize when they watch television how long television takes to make any kind
Right.
of television.
Yep.
From the idea to the actual rollout of it, it's years and years and years. And this was no different. And this one was tough, you know, I'll be honest. It was, you know, most of my shows How to Do Florida, I go out there and I have a good time, I goof off, and like it's a fun show. You know, there was times when this show when it wasn't fun, it was very heavy.
Yeah.
The subject matter was very deep and very personal, and I take those things. I'm a very spiritual person too, and so like connecting with all of this and seeing what we're doing to the land and it hurt at the same time, meeting people who are doing incredible things, like, felt good, and it gave me hope. But, yeah, those were some of the I don't know if you remember a lot of that back and forth up front, Tracy, deciding, like, "Okay, what are we gonna tell people, and then what subjects are we gonna cover?"
I do, and I have to say, we've never made a TV show before at Conservation Florida, but it was really, really cool getting to work with Crawford Entertainment and sort of peeking behind, you know, and learning something new, and we learned something every day, from Chad and his team about the nuance and the beauty that goes into making good television, and, you know, I like to think our powers combined, you know, with
Mhm,
the conservation background and our team of scientists and lawyers and sort of
mhm.
conservation geeks and then Chad and his team who are just experts at making really good Florida-centric TV that we produce something that's really meaningful. And like Chad said, you know, it does when you watch the series and it is totally bingeable. Most people that I've talked to sit down and watch all 6 back to back to back. And you feel it. It does feel very
Yeah,
heavy. But one of my very favorite things about this show is that we always left viewers, it was our goal to leave viewers with hope and with a way to get involved, and we introduced them to just, you know, some. We unfortunately couldn't introduce them to all of the people working on the ground to save wild Florida, but introducing them to some pretty cool people and leaving them with a way to get involved, I'd like to think that it left people with some joy about what we can all do together.
yeah, and I'll say too, coming off that, we agreed, and I agreed up front, and we both said, like, "Look, we don't wanna end each of these shows with the, you know, the polar bear floating on the iceberg, you know, going out to sea," you know, like, that's not what we wanna do. But it
Right.
was I will say, it was tough not to play that card, you know, because when you're doing a conservation or an environmental documentary like that, you have so much material where you really can go there with people and make them feel guilty and make them feel a certain way. But we didn't want to do that. And we wanted to really focus on being truthful about what the situation is. But at the same time, like, there is a lot of hope out there. And there is time to right the ship and to move in the good direction. And, you know, I think that was something that we were both kind of committed to. But I will admit there was times when we could have easily made the viewer feel very guilty, you
Yeah.
know, for who we are and what we're doing living here. You know, we have to reconcile with that as human beings living here. We have to kind of reconcile with that. And so I think I'm very proud of that balance that we walked, and we it was a lot of back and forth with Conservation Florida and their team, and kind of coming up with that messaging. But I'm pretty proud with how it landed.
Me too, Chad.
Yeah.
And Tracy, was there a moment or moments as you were filming when it kind of hit you the impact that this docuseries may have on getting people to kind of get it?
And Chad
Yeah.
laughs,
Yeah.
for probably, probably a moment every time, every time.
Yeah.
And this show, I think it does a really good job of bringing the average Floridian to places that they might not otherwise experience, right? So
Mm,
not everybody is going to get out on a 3,000-acre ranch in the middle of Okeechobee. Most of us won't ever
yeah.
drive through Okeechobee,
Right.
right? So,
Yep.
getting to experience it, meet the people working the land, and then connect it with conservation is critical, right? We need it if we're going to raise awareness, and we do, we need all hands on deck to save
Mhm.
this place that we love. We needed to introduce Floridians to places they wouldn't typically experience. Not everybody's going to dive deep in a Florida spring and or appreciate the difference between what a healthy spring looks like and a not healthy spring looks like if you haven't seen the shift over the last few decades.
Yep.
And this show does that. And so there were certainly moments that it took my breath away, thinking, look at what we're doing, and look at what we're sharing, and look at these pockets of old Florida that we're getting to share with the world. And the beauty is pretty remarkable, and the people that are passionate about it are remarkable. So yes, there were a ton of moments that inspired me, to keep doing this work as well.
Well, yeah, and I'll just say too, coming off of that, like, as a filmmaker, there was times when it just felt heavy. I use that term quite a bit when I think about this series, just because as someone who uses media to influence people, you realize the power that you have with media, right? And we've seen that used for good, and we've seen that used for bad. And it feels very humbling and very heavy when you realize that, well, we're crafting something here that's going to change hearts and minds, that's going to have an effect on people. And as the filmmaker, and I know Tracy, your team felt this too. uh, it feels heavy. It feels like, well, this is a responsibility, and I think we took that very seriously. And who we filmed, what we filmed, how we filmed it. And look, I'll be honest, I was glad when it was over, just because it just felt, and you
Sure.
get so into it too, you kind of begin to lose yourself. And once you're able to kind of step back, I watched it a couple nights ago. I'm like, this is really great. Like finally, like, oh my gosh, this is really good. And I'm like, but when you're so in it, it's hard to have those moments where you can look back on and appreciate it, because it becomes, it just is all around you, and it's hard to see it fresh sometimes until you can step away. But yeah, I was telling my wife, I was like, honey, we should watch this. This is really good. She's like, I've already seen it. I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna watch it again.
It is really good, and you're right. Watching it a few months removed is a totally different experience.
Yes,
And Chad,
yes.
I haven't shared with you yet, but since streaming the show,
Yeah.
we have received a handful of phone calls from Floridians with land across the state. And they'll say, look,
Mm,
I'm no tree hugger. I am no environmentalist, but you know what? I love this state and I
mm,
have land and I want to do my part. And how can I get involved in conservation? And they
yeah.
say, you know what, I saw this show, Protect Our Paradise, and
Mm.
I wanna be involved. I wanna do something, and
Well,
I
it is the most. I don't interrupt you to tell you the best. Wanted to get this out before I forget. But it is the most watched series on our channel right now. I was looking at our stats yesterday, and it is the most watched. And it's been that way for almost the last month and a half now. So it's definitely getting a lot of people are watching it, and that's really cool to hear that, because it's doing what it's supposed to do, right?
exactly.
Well, and Chad, from a filmmaker perspective, I understand the series, you want it to be an educational call to action, but you also don't wanna be in their face and make it overwhelming to them because you need to
Mm.
balance the fact that somebody wants to help, but at the same time, you don't want them to feel like, "Well, I'm just one person, I can't make a difference." Like, so talk about that kind of fine line between wanting to push them in a direction, but not being overwhelming them.
The hardest episode to produce was the episode on growth. And to me, to my knowledge, I have not seen a piece done on our growth like we did. I've seen pieces on water. We've had pieces on the corridor, but what we were able to do and talk about growth, I think, was uncharted territory in terms of really honestly looking at how fast we're growing, what are the mechanisms in place to manage our growth, who is doing this, all the different topics and ideas around how we grow. And look, anybody you talk to has an opinion about that we're growing too fast, right? I don't care if you moved here from Kentucky 2 months ago and you're in a neighborhood, now they're building another neighborhood across your road. You're
Right.
not happy that they're building a neighborhood, even though you've only been here for 2 months, right? It doesn't take long for you to be here to have an opinion about how fast we're growing. I think that one was the most uncharted territory for me. And I don't know how you feel, Tracy, but like I felt like that episode was just very eye-opening, and we get a lot of comments about that episode specifically.
Yeah, that one was tough. And
Yeah.
I think the most emotional one for me was probably water, but the
Mm,
toughest
yeah.
to create fairly was growth.
Yeah.
And another thing, we made sure that this wasn't a point the finger, you
Mm,
know, angry sort of television show. And
yeah.
like Chad said earlier, when it was hard, it's hard not to, show the dying manatee or the saddest things out there. It's also difficult not to say things that, you know, it's hard not to point the finger. It's just a natural human reaction, right?
Sure.
But
Yeah.
what we learned in really making this, and it's something I think we all knew already, but what became very poignant to us is that all of us are to blame for all of these things. And I
Yeah.
looked at myself and I thought, well, darn, I have a yard and I'm not doing everything I can to be a good steward of the land that I own.
Mhm.
And just little things like that that I think all of us can begin to look inward and ask, what can I do? How can I get involved? How can I be the difference that I want to see in Florida? And it can start with your own yard. It can start with getting involved in an organization in your hometown, or getting involved with Conservation Florida, getting involved with any of your water keepers, or getting involved in whatever sparks your passion in an outdoors group. All of that is doing something to protect wild Florida.
I think one of the things that Clyde Butcher said to me one time, I'll never forget. We were interviewing him, and he said, I don't want to save the panther. I want to save the land the panther lives on. The panther can take care of himself.
Mhm.
And I think growing up in Florida, a lot of our conservation was very species specific. It was save the manatees, save the panthers, save the alligators, save the eagle. And what I love and what I've learned so much about working with Conservation Florida is, well, they're concerned about those species, but they're more concerned about the land those species live on. And we know that if we give those species land and the space they need to roam, like they'll thrive, they'll do their thing. So this emphasis on protecting land, um, uh, you know, uh, that is really the answer. Like there's such this race to buy land from development, and the conflict with ag, and a lot of that ag land going to development, the pressures of growth, like the only way we're going to be able to save what we love about Florida to where it's recognizable in 50 years if we continue to buy and lock down land from development and put it in some kind of conservation easement. And that's what that is at the very heart of what Conservation Florida does. And people get that just resonates with people. Oh, you're going to buy this land, or you're going to put it in easement so it will never be a Walmart. People get that, and
Mhm.
they're like, sign me up. That's what we need. We need to be doing more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a mentor of mine, Clay Henderson, and he always says,
Yes.
"Don't fight it, don't fight it, buy it." And
Yes.
and I
Yes.
I love that. And that's exactly right, Chad. And we have the science and we have the data and we know what land we need to protect. And when we protect land, we're protecting our water, we're protecting our wildlife, and frankly, we're protecting the Floridian way of life. We're protecting access to nature, to fishing and bird watching and walking, right, in wild places. And all of that is a part of what, why we all love Florida. We love the views, we love the green, we love the aquamarine waters and the sunsets, and all of that is being protected by good science-based land protection.
And Tracy, now, long term, can Florida save what Florida is at 25, 30 plus million people?
Yes. Now, I am accused all the time of being an eternal optimist. And so I say yes without hesitation because, and a lot of this recent inspiration really does come from Protect Our Paradise and getting to meet and witness a lot of the good that's happening outside of my land protection silo, if you will.
Yeah.
But the people working in the state to protect the wildness of our state are extraordinary. But beyond that, Floridians overwhelmingly care about protecting wild Florida.
Hmm.
Floridians time and time and time again stand up for conservation. And this it breaks through barriers in Florida, unlike anywhere else in our nation, right? So socioeconomic, political, people care. If you're a Floridian, you care about conservation. And that fuels me every single day. We have the data. There are extraordinary scientists in our state who have really, in the last 20 to 30 years, done some remarkable research on the growth that we're experiencing, what's that forecasting future growth, and overlaying that with our special places. So our endangered habitats and dark skies and the path of the panther, for example. So we know what land we need to save in order to have a sustainable future for Florida. And we're working every single day to do that. And meeting all of the partners out there that are doing it and meeting Floridians and hearing from Floridians who are watching the show and that it's resonating with them. Heck yes, we can do this. All hands on deck, 100% we can save wild Florida. But we have to all act now.
Where a lot of this started for me was 2018 when we had just one of the worst blue-green algae events in Southwest Florida on both the East Coast and West Coast. And I think that was so embarrassing for Florida. I was embarrassed. I think it took everybody by surprise. I think it shocked everybody how many large mammals and large fish die. Look, we've been having fish kills in this state for as long as as history's been recorded.
Yeah.
But normally those fish kills are smaller fish, mullet, bait. It's not apex predators, not dolphin, not turtles, not manatees, not Goliath or Goliath grouper. And so that was the first time we saw just such a massive across the board fish kill, and it rung our bell. I know it rung my bell, and it really poured gas on a lot of groups that coming off to Tracy's point, I think today we have this consensus that we don't want to go there again. But sadly, I do think it will get worse before it gets better, because I think as humans, we need those reminders. We need our bell rung every once in a while to remind us what we're up against, the impact we're having on this land. And so we've had some moments like that since 2008, but not that bad. And hopefully with each of those, we learn, we get better at this, and we take away things that will stick in terms of how we live and how we treat this land. But look, we're human, and sometimes we need our bell rung. And that one for me was a huge one. And I'll also say reading the 2070 report was a big wake up call, which was done by the Department of Ag and University of Florida's Geoplan Center, which really kind of mapped out our future growth. And I don't want to get into it too much now, but it was like, holy mackerel, we're growing and we're not stopping growing. And water, a lot of things come into play that are issues when you're talking about that kind of growth going into 2070.
Yeah.
Yeah. And since we've, started recording today, this podcast, we have lost acres of wild Florida. That is how fast it is happening. We've lost acres since we've begun talking. And so the rapid transition to more intense use is happening. And I think those of us who maybe aren't, walking knee deep in a swamp but are driving down the road that you've driven down every day for the last 20 years, and that forest that you've passed by is gone
Yep.
overnight.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a bell being rung, and you say,
Mhm.
"What in the heck? Where did that go? It was here yesterday, gone." And so you start to see some of the places that you love disappear, and I think more and more of us are waking up.
So, Chad, we talked a little bit about how the series was a bit of a call to action. When we say that, what is it that you hope people take from it and act upon?
This sounds cheesy, like a old PSA, but it's like the more you know, like so many people are here and they just don't know what they don't know. And I think just knowing this information, look, this series is not going to change the course of time and fix our problems, but I think if it does anything, I want it just to educate people and so that they just know. And because I do think that if people know and they're aware, I think now more than ever, they do want to respond to that message and they do want to do good and they do want to have their head on a swivel and be looking around for ways they can get involved and just being a part, like Tracy alluded to yesterday, I do feel like, just by the nature of you physically living here, you are part of the problem.
Mhm.
And so knowing that, how can you be part of the solution? So I think education is just a big part of it. I'll never forget I attended the Corridor Summit, which was this giant collection of just the who's who in our state of people who are working on land conservation and species protection. I mean, it was just a real heady group of people, right? Lots of PhDs. And I asked him, I was like, what's the biggest threat to the corridor? They were talking specifically about the corridor, which is this patchwork of connected land that runs north to south through our state that really allows animals to move and roam freely, which is really under a threat from development, that corridor.
Yep.
So what's the best way to protect the corridor? And they said education. I was surprised at that. I thought it was going to be land protection or policy, but it really is this idea that we have so many people here who just don't know. And I think that's what I hope this series does is just educate people on what we're up against.
Tracy, how about you? What do you hope is kind of the call to action that comes out of this?
I second Chad in that I hope education is the big one. I also hope inspiration is another. I want viewers, and it's my hope that viewers watch the series and fall in love with Florida again if they've forgotten, what makes us so special, and feel inspired to get involved and to do their part. And whether that's attending a beach cleanup or having their children watch the series or supporting a local conservation organization, that is exactly what we need. We need
Yeah,
Floridians to care. We need them to act, whether that's attending a roundtable at your local community's conversation about, an agricultural boundary or a park, or calling your elected officials and saying, "This is something that really matters to me. Please
yeah,
continue to be a champion for it in Tallahassee or at the local level um, or federal level." I mean, it's incredible what one person is capable of doing. And if
mm,
all of us continue to speak up for Wild Florida, again, I am such an optimist. I believe in us. We can save this place. We can protect our paradise.
And Tracy, talk about how people can get involved with Conservation Florida.
Yes, we would love, love, love to have you join us and be a part of our team. We are statewide, so we span from Pensacola to the Florida Keys, and we have Floridians joining us every day that care about this place that we call home. What you can do to get involved is visit conservationfla.org. We have volunteer events. We have ways to get involved with us, attend one of our events. We also, we are a nonprofit and we are 100% fueled by support. And so if you feel inclined to make a donation and support us, otherwise we would be so grateful. But that is how we are saving land, and land isn't cheap. So we are really relying on the generosity and really the teamwork of people that want to see this mission succeed.
And Chad, let's make sure everybody knows exactly how to view the docuseries.
Well, you can watch it on demand at discoverfloridachannel.com. You can also download that on your Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire. It's an app that functions just like every other streaming app. And grab yourself some orange juice and some popcorn. I like mine heavy pulp. Sit down and just learn about how incredible this state is and how you can get involved to protect it.
And tell us where people can follow you and learn more about Crawford Entertainment.
I would recommend just going to Discover Florida channel, our Instagram handle, our Facebook. That's where all of our shows are promoted, and anything new comes out. That's where we talk to people about what we're doing. And we've got a lot of exciting shows coming out, and there's so much good content and good television to made here in Florida. I mean, getting back to the Film Florida component, I'm such an advocate of production here in our state. We've got incredible crews, and we have incredible characters who have great stories to tell. Many of them we met doing Protect Our Paradise, but they're just good television, and we're out there finding these people, and hopefully looking forward to making some really good television here for people in this space of what I have coined geotainment, which is this idea that I can create an entertaining streaming channel around a geographic location. And that's what we're trying to do. And that if you live here, want to live here, know somebody who lives here or vacation here, you're drawn, just like so many, probably one of the most sought after destinations on this planet is Florida. I mean, it's hard pressed to find somebody in a civilized world who doesn't know somebody that's been here or has been here themselves.
Yeah.
And so many people around this globe have a connection to Florida, and we believe in that. And we believe that's strong enough to draw a large audience who are interested in this Florida focused programming. So that's what we're doing. And, we'd love for you to kind of jump on there and watch content and be a part of our community that we're building around this content.
And Traci, let's give everybody your website again, as social media pages that you guys are active on, and anything else that Conservation Florida wants to plug here.
Thanks, John. Yes, that is conservationfla.org, or you can follow us online at Conservation Florida. And we would love for you to share content as well. We have, of course, Protect Our Paradise up there, but we also have fun tidbits about nature and Florida. So getting the word out there is helpful. And again, we would be grateful for anyone listening to join us in this mission and help us save this place we love.
Amen.
Well, Chad and Traci, we certainly appreciate you being on the podcast and sharing the story of Protect Our Paradise, as important as that is. Thanks for spending time with us, and thanks for being on the Film Florida podcast.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening to the Film Florida podcast. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org and like or follow our social media pages. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. Please also consider going to our website and donating $20.24 for our 2024 fundraising campaign. Check out the Film Florida merchandise at filmflorida.creator-spring.com, and please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.